Are you thinking about making a move to Florida? Well, a lot of people are, and they say 1,000 people net a day are making their way to Florida. And why not? The weather's great. There's some great housing areas being developed here in all of Florida. And for the most part, the economy is good despite us being in a semi-recession. In this video, I'm going to go over, however, some 4 explosive costs that have risen in Florida over the last few years that you need to be aware about before making your decision to move to Florida here. It may change your mind. I get people calling me almost every day asking me about Florida, their prices, costs, and some of them are outright shocked. This is not your parents' or grandparents' Florida anymore. I think it's better, but still, there's 4 costs that are just explosive, have increased over the last 5 to 10 years. Some say we're out of control. I'm going to go over those 4 right now. Okay, if there's only one way you can escape the rising cost of car insurance, if you ride a bike, if you ride a golf cart, or if you Uber all the time, or if you have your own chauffeur. Otherwise, you're gonna be like the rest of us, and we need to know about these rising costs of car insurance for driving around the streets of Florida. So the first cost we're gonna talk about here in Florida that is just escalating and is just sky high is car insurance. So car insurance in Florida, and I use statistics from Bankrate and insurance.com. They seem to be very reliable and I use them. So the state of Florida ranks #1 in the nation when it comes to the average car insurance bill for your automobile. And that average is about $3,200 per vehicle. That's a lot. And considering if you have you and your spouse, and maybe you have a teenage son or daughter, 1 or 2 of those, that's an additional $1,000 above the nation average per year. Car insurance has gone up over 20% the last year itself. And Florida itself is almost 60% higher than the national average when it comes to car insurance. So why is that the case? Well, I can speculate that's because population is growing here in Florida. We get a lot of tourists that come in that don't know where they're going. I'm sure you've all experienced that. You know, we get some weather here, which, you know, does cause damage to cars. We get hail sometimes. And of course, your policies are going to depend on a lot of factors. They're going to depend on if you're in a urban area or if you're in a rural area, if you got an old car, new car, if you got history with tickets, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of variables there, but we're talking about just on average. Car insurance in Florida is high and it's getting higher. So you can expect your car insurance to be, $1,000 or so more than the national average per vehicle per year. But let's also debunk a couple other things. So, you know, there's a few other videos out there with other people that are, I don't believe, residents of Florida. And they're just searching online, but I hear some say that you come down here, you're going to pay an excise tax once you move your vehicle here to Florida, and that's 6% generally. There's no Florida excise tax for moving your vehicles down here. Now, yes, if you move down here on a permanent basis, you're going to have to get a Florida license plate, you're going to have to register your vehicle, and you have to get a Florida driver's license. Get a Florida driver's license that's less than $100 and per year for registration is also under $100. You may have a few other incidental costs there, but you're not paying a huge excise tax, so don't worry about paying 6% on your value of your vehicle going to the DMV. That's not the case. Now, some municipalities or cities may have that, but the state of Florida does not. Again, car insurance is something that you're going to pay more for when you move here to Florida. Number 2 on my list is home prices, just home prices in general. So Florida is not your parents' or your grandparents' Florida anymore. You can't come down here in most situations. You can't come down here and buy a beautiful brand new home for $100,000 or $125,000 and pay $1,000 in property tax. That's not happening in most cases. If it is, then you're not getting much of a home or property. Property values, of course, through COVID went up 25% per year. But for example, even in the last 25 years, if you bought a home at say $125,000, that value for the next 10 years or so, that value went up almost, it doubled. It probably went up to over $300,000, the value of your property in that time, up to about 2006, 2007, went up to about $300,000. So your value doubled. Of course, then the downturn hit. The recession hit in 08. It bottomed out in about 2011. 2012, values went back down almost to where that original number was, probably about 150,000 or so. But then since 2012-ish, property values in Florida have just steadily risen to where last year, 2022, they topped out in most areas. And since then we've seen prices flatten a little bit, and some areas have gone down. Here in the Melbourne area, they have not gone down yet. In fact, they've risen here in this last year from summer 2022 through now, which is May 2023. They've still gone up a little bit, about 5%. But some areas have gone down. So for somebody that bought a property in 1998 for $125,000, up to this year, 2023, that value is about $500,000. Okay, back in 1998, as recent as that was 25 years ago, you could buy a brand new 4-bedroom home on a lake, nice neighborhood, suburban neighborhood, for $125,000. I'm not talking about the 60s, I'm not talking about the 70s, I'm talking about 1998. You could buy a 4-bedroom, 2,200 square foot home, 2-car garage on the lake for $125,000. That home now is worth $500,000. This is the type of thing you need to be aware of. Property values have gone up, not only in Florida, they've gone up everywhere. Okay, so it's not, Florida's not the only one. They've gone up in South Carolina, they've gone up in Georgia, they've gone up in Vermont, they've gone up in Maine, they've gone up everywhere. But this is what's happening in Florida. So the demand, as well as, of course, the great weather, the economy as good as it can be in this semi-recession, the values are up there pretty high. So I get people calling and asking about prices. And it used to be, you know, properties in the Northeast, you could get somebody selling in the Northeast for say $500,000 or $600,000, and here in Florida it'd be $300,000 or $400,000. Not anymore. I'm talking to a lot of clients of mine, and property values are almost even in many areas, not all. And again, everything is relative. So Florida is not the highest state in the nation when it comes to values. They're not the least, so it's all relative. 2022, the average single-family home sale was just north of $400,000. So that was the median, or actually that was the sales price, the average sales price. Actually, that was the median sales price for single-family homes in all of Florida, $400,000. In this area here in Melbourne, Florida, the average for the entire county is about $355,000. So it's a little bit less, about 10% less. So the point being, values have gone up. You need to be aware of that. You need to account for that. You need to know that the home you're wanting is a certain size, certain age. Give me a call and I'll be happy to tell you what you can get for that money. That being said, there's still, people are flooding the Florida. The neighborhoods are very nice. Crime is relatively low. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of crime everywhere. And all areas are different, of course. You have to do your research on that yourself. When it comes to prices, prices are very high when it comes to home values, when it comes to purchasing a home. Okay, so let's talk about the next explosive rising cost in Florida, and that goes along with the home prices, and that's property taxes. So inevitably, if your home value is higher, your property taxes are going higher. So Florida doesn't rank at the top when it comes to property taxes, that's for sure. But when your value increases, your taxes are going up. Now again, I hear stories online where don't move to Florida, or be careful, you might be wiped out, your savings might be drained and everything else. You know, that's just a bunch of, you know, scare tactics to get clicks. So the fact is, since 2012, property values have not really gone down here in Florida. So if you get into a situation where you bought, you don't like it, you're still going to get out of there and probably net, at worst, net zero, maybe lose a bit of money. You're not going to go into financial ruin. Okay? You're not going to lose all your money. But you have to buy smart. You have to have an agent that knows the area well, knows the ramifications. So there's occasionally you get buyers that come in, they don't like their job or they don't like the area, they want to move out right away, and they might net a little loss on their sale, but they're not going into financial ruin. They're not losing all their nest egg. They're not doing all this and that, because homes are still selling at this point, and I expect that to happen with such demand here in Florida. But again, inevitably, with the home values going up, your property taxes are going up. And one thing to look out for, we have a very nice property tax rule. It's called Save Our Homes. So once you get into a homesteaded home here in Florida, there's a rule that your property taxes cannot go up more than 3% a year. What does that mean? This was implemented back when the day in the early 2000s, when again property values were escalating and people couldn't afford their tax bill when the tax bill when the values were escalating and your tax values were going up, up, and up. You have to have an experienced agent that knows when you're buying a property. Okay, you have to know. So if the taxes are artificially low, that agent will know if they're artificially low. They'll know that, for example, if somebody bought a property 25 years ago for $200,000, their taxes are probably only gonna be $2,500 or $3,000. When it goes to sell for $500 or $550, those taxes are probably gonna go double. They're probably gonna get up about $5,000 or so. So if you're surprised by that, then you didn't have a good agent that was helping you with your sale, because they would know that up front if the taxes are artificially low, and you would know that up front. So again, that's why we're here, is to tell you when you're in a situation where you can't assume that the advertised taxes on the MLS listing is a certain amount. You have to know that if that's going to be artificially low, and that's what real estate professionals like myself know and will advise our clients too. So again, property taxes, the good thing there is once you get in, the property taxes cannot go more than 3% higher per year as long as it's a homesteaded property, and that's a great thing. Okay, last but not least on my list, and is the most notorious of all, is home insurance. Home insurance, we could talk for about 2 hours on home insurance. I don't have that much time. So home insurance in Florida is going through the roof right now, and it's in a lot of turmoil. And yes, it's partly because of hurricanes. It's mostly not because of hurricanes, but it's partly because of hurricanes. Insurance companies have worked hurricanes into their algorithm and their costs for years. And yes, you could argue maybe there's a few more hurricanes nowadays that comes and goes. There was a 5, 6, 7 year period about 10 years ago where Florida didn't get hit by a major hurricane. So there was years where there was nothing or very little when it came to that sort of damage. But the real problem with home insurance has to do with fraud and with fraudulent claim. And that is a long story. It has to do with the process that the insurance companies had with making claims. So you could have some damage, you could hire a contractor to inspect your roof, for example. The roofer said that the roof needed replacement. They could say, okay, it's going to cost $25,000 to do it, when in essence, a lot of times it's not that much. We found that estimates on contracting work, insurance purposes, a lot of times they overestimated by 50% in many situations. So when you multiply that times thousands and thousands and thousands of people that are asking for claims which may not be warranted, and then on top of that overestimating their claims by 50%, and then the insurance companies not really wanting to go to court to fight it, to spend more money, a lot of times they just settle and accept those costs and charges. That's where the big rub happens with increased insurance costs, is fraud for claims that aren't really justified. And that's a short story when it comes to home insurance. So over the last 20, 30 years, many companies have backed out of Florida due to those reasons and others, but State Farm, Allstate, the biggies stopped writing policies in Florida for the most part 20, 25 years ago. I still have a State Farm policy, and it's a very good policy, but if I move, I doubt if I'll be able to transfer to somewhere else. Florida is not the highest home insurance annual rate state in the nation. It's somewhere in the top 10 or so, but it is rising every year. And it's because there's a limited amount of carriers. There's more and more carriers that are bowing out. There's less selection, so whenever you have less competition, the costs are going up. There's been some like 12 to 14 insurance companies that have dropped or gone out of business or gone insolvent in the last 10 years. So that's limited competition. By limiting competition, you're going to have increased costs. So the legislature here in Florida is doing things to mitigate the fraud capability of people, and that's going to help the situation. It would help if we didn't have some major hurricanes hitting us like Ian did, Nicole did last year. So there's no doubt hurricanes play a part in this. So whenever you have a major hurricane like Ian hitting Fort Myers and Cape Coral, and Nicole also hitting the state of Florida in 1 year, of course that's going to wreak havoc on the insurance company, which again will pass down the cost to everybody else. So home insurance is a problem. You can get insurance. Okay, you can get There are still some good carriers out there where you can get independent coverage. About 20 years ago, the state of Florida developed a state insurance company called Citizens. Citizens was developed to cover those who couldn't get insurance or was too costly in the open market. Because the open market now is limited, Citizens has taken on a greater responsibility in the market. An increased number of homes are using Citizens. Citizens costs are generally lower than the independent over-the-market insurance companies, but Citizens is also going up, and the governor has said they're going up. They're going up as well. So again, by bank rate, and insurance.com says the average home in Florida is being insured for about $2,700 a year. Many are paying more. And I want to hear you in the comments. Tell me what your situation is with insurance. So my insurance for a long time was about $1,800, $1,900. In the last 2 or 3 years now, it's up to about $2,700. So basically it's gone up 50% here in the last 2 or 3 years. So even $2,700 I would regard as not too bad, while others are paying $3,000, $4,000, and $5,000, but still it's increased. So these are the kind of numbers that you need to be aware of before you make the move here. These are the 4 costs that you need to be aware of. Now, one other thing about home insurance. So again, I hear others online spouting that Florida is making everybody pay for flood insurance. So that is a false statement. Everybody is not required to get flood insurance. The legislature in January, I believe it was January, either December or January, said that for those who have Citizens property insurance, if you have Citizens property insurance, which again is the state-sponsored insurance, then you have to get flood insurance. So right now that's only 10% or so of the market, maybe 15% of the market. So it's not everybody. It's not everybody. So we have flood zone, just like all states, flood zones here in Florida. If you have a flood zone, if you're not in a flood zone, it's called flood zone X. Okay, so if you're in a flood zone X, you can still decide to get homeowners, you can still decide to get flood insurance. That flood insurance is somewhere around $300. Not much, not bad at all. Again, your homeowner's insurance does not cover for rising waters. That's what flood insurance covers. If your roof leak, that's not flood damage. If you got water that's rising, coming into your foundation, that's flood. So if you're in a flood area, it doesn't mean you're going to flood necessarily. And if you're not in a flood area, it doesn't mean you're not going to flood. Okay, you just have to know your area. Again, you have to have an agent in your area, an experienced agent like myself that knows areas, knows if you're going to be required to get flood insurance or if it's just a good idea to have. Because some areas are known to flood and are not in flood zone. There's some areas that you're going to have to get flood insurance and you're not ever have to worry about it, but you still have to get it. Okay, so if you own your home outright and don't have a mortgage, then you're not required to get any kind of home insurance or flood insurance. But I warn against that. Unless you're a multimillionaire and you want to self-insure, still suggest everybody get home insurance, get flood insurance if it's a required, of course, thing, or if it's a suggested thing. If you have a mortgage, you have to get home insurance. If you don't have home insurance, the lender will put a forced insurance policy on your home that'll cover basically just them, and it'll probably be twice as much as if you got out there on your own. So a lot of people say, well, I don't want to have to pay flood insurance, so I'm not going to go on Citizens. We're going to get somewhere else. Well, Citizens plus flood insurance is probably going to be less expensive than most of the independent insurance companies out there. So again, you just have to shop. You have to have an experienced agent like myself that knows the areas, knows insurance companies, knows who you can contact to get the best rate. So it's a matter about getting good coverage when it comes to insurance, but it's also about getting the best rate. And I've got a dozen or so insurance companies here that I work with that will hunt and get the best rate for you. Unfortunately, the rates come and go and they increase through time, and you just have to continually shop it. Just like peanut butter on the shelf, you have to continually shop your insurance. That's a brief talk here about the escalating costs here in Florida. It's still very doable, but the costs are higher than you probably think. And you need to know that from the get-go. You need to know about your car insurance. You need to know about the home price values, the property tax increases, and you need to know about certainly your home insurance options and the cost associated with that. Yeah, my name is David Jelinek. I'm a local real estate agent here in the Melbourne, Florida area, which is also known as the Space Coast. I've sold hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of homes here over my 36 years in real estate, and I can help you too. But I can't help you unless you reach out, unless you text me, email me, or send me an email, or give me a call. I can't help you unless you do that. I know this area very well, and I can steer you in the right direction when it comes to a potential purchase here in the Melbourne area. Thanks again for watching. I'm going to suggest some other videos for you here now. Have a great day.